I'm joined now by Michelle Goldberg, the Pulitzer Prize-winning author of The Means of Reproduction, and Robin Marty, the executive director of the West Alabama Women's Center and the author of the new handbook for a post-Roe America. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for being with us. Robin, when Dobbs came down, anti-abortion activists downplayed concerns that these new bans would actually endanger women's lives. They pointed to things like medical advances and particularly these exceptions that would be made. People like you, because you and I talked very shortly after Dobbs failed in Alabama, you always believed what the true intentions were. Talk to me about that and sort of the naivete that we've all had around what really happened when Dobbs fell.
Well,
when Roe fell, I'm sorry.
Thank you for having me on. And also, I think not everybody was naive about what would happen when this occurred. We knew exactly what would happen. This was coming. We were just waiting for it to be reported. And the reason it took this long to get here is because there is an immense amount of privilege that comes from being able to fight this. Kate Cox, in my opinion, is a hero because I myself have had a miscarriage. I know what it is like to have something inside of you that you need a doctor to remove, and the horror of sitting there for days, and in her case, much longer than that, in order to proceed. That she fought this was extraordinarily brave. But we knew exceptions didn't exist. We knew that it requires a doctor who's willing to do it. It requires a nearby hospital. It requires the ability to wait and to try and fight this out. And we knew this was never, ever going to be an exception that people would be able to use.
Michelle, I was speaking to one of the attorneys who was representing Kate Cox's case in Texas after she left. And I asked him, why bother at this point? And he said, because we have to know the outcome of what this law really means. And I said, well, we know the outcome of what this law means. It always comes down the same way. And he said, and that's why people have to realize this has to be dealt with politically.
Well, I think it's really interesting because immediately when Dobbs fell, these horror stories started, immediately when Roe fell, these horror stories started trickling out. And there was a sort of conspiracy theory that we started hearing from the anti-abortion movement, which is these are doctors misinterpreting the law, or the pro-choice forces are sowing confusion about the law, making hospitals afraid to intervene in cases where there should be an obvious exception. And that was always, frankly, a lie. And what you saw here, and what you've seen repeatedly in Texas, is pro-choice lawyers often from the Center for Reproductive Rights, going to court to try to clarify what exemptions actually exist, if any of these exemptions are workable. And to be clear, if there were workable exemptions, it would redound to the benefit, I think, of anti-abortion forces, because it would make these laws more politically palatable. But nevertheless, the anti-abortion movement does not want workable exemptions because it would require deferring to doctors' recommendations or to doctors' decision-making over politicians. And so what you've seen again and again is lawyers and pro-choice activists trying to get some sort of clarity on when it's possible to intervene, and the anti-abortion movement refusing to give them that clarity. And so under those circumstances, Ken Paxton wrote a letter after there was a judge authorized this abortion. Ken Paxton wrote a letter to hospitals where it might take place, saying that the court order would not protect them from possible felony charges. So under these circumstances, what doctor, what hospital is going to err on the side of
after they actually have a letter from the Attorney General? That's the wild part. Ken Paxton is the Attorney General of Texas, an interesting character unto his own. But Robin, when you and I were in Alabama, we did discuss the idea that there are attorneys general across the country, in particular in the South, who have signaled these kinds of things, right? In Ken Paxton's case, he wrote a letter to the 3 hospitals where the doctor who was dealing with Kate Cox was affiliated. But in Alabama, you got an attorney general who's sort of indicated he's definitely trying to make a case out of somebody. He will come after people who break what he believes to be the spirit or the letter of the law.
For sure. And that is why our clinic, as well as other clinics and Yellowhammer Fund, have done our lawsuit in order to get clarity as to whether we are allowed to provide any support or even information about where legal abortion exists. We still have not had a response. This case still has not been heard in any way, shape, or form. And I am not exaggerating when I say that people are struggling and potentially dying out here. We have seen that the maternal mortality rate has gone up. We've seen that the infant mortality rate has gone up. People are hurting. We see them every day at the clinic. And so having this threat looming over your head and having nobody actually do the action that is necessary in order for us to get clarity, that's harming everyone to a point where at some point there may need to be direct action in order to just finally get things moving forward and find out where the lines really are and what the appetite is for arrest.
So, Michelle, to that point of clarity, that is what Kate Cox was seeking. That is what actually the Supreme Court of Texas gave her. And the clarity, it seems, in many of these states, in conservative states with conservative courts, the clarity is you're not getting an abortion. If your doctor says you need an abortion, you're probably not getting an abortion. If your fetus is at risk, you're not getting an abortion. If you're going to die, you may not be getting an abortion. At that point, what do people need to do?
Well, I think it depends on what you mean by people, right?
Meaning us, society. Those of us who think these are draconian laws that we were duped into thinking would be something else.
Well, again, I would say, like Robin, I don't think all of us were duped. But I think, look, what you need is a national codification of Roe versus Wade. And in the meantime, you need, a state-by-state legal action. And also, I think, kind of some sort of federal action that, and the Biden administration has tried to do some of this, to clarify that hospitals, are in violation of their responsibility if they turn away someone who's in kind of acute medical distress and needs a medical termination.
Robin, to the extent that we have to get that's a hell of a hill to climb because of the difficulties in getting the codification of abortion passed in the United States Senate. It can be done in the House, but this has been motivating in the last midterm elections, in off-year elections, in special elections, and in referenda around the country. People who don't even identify as being supporters of abortion rights don't want rights taken away from them in an unusual way. They don't want rights taken away from them at all.
Agreed. And I think that one of the things that we need to be prepared for is we have now seen how so-called exceptions have played out. The next thing is going to be we will not arrest the person who had the abortion, because we already knew they were lying about the ability for people to get exceptions when they are in the law. We know that the next thing that they are lying about is punishing the person who is getting the abortion. We've seen laws in Oklahoma. We saw a law in Alabama that actually was going to pull that protection. And so that is where they're going next. When we say you didn't expect exceptions to not be real, and here they are, we are also saying now they are going to arrest people who get abortions. Be prepared for that. Know that and vote knowing that, because we can change this. And the only thing that will fix what's down here in the South is a federal law.
Michelle, support for abortion is currently at its highest level since the 1970s, since Roe was first established. According to a recent Wall Street Journal NORC poll, 55% of Americans almost believe that a pregnant woman should be able to obtain any abortion for any reason. 9 in 10 people support abortion access in cases of rape, incest, or when a woman's health is in danger. How do you explain the discrepancy between these numbers and what Robin Marty is talking about in Alabama, what Kate Cox was dealing with in Texas and across the South?
Well, there's two different things, right? And because I do think there's probably some southern states where those numbers are a little bit different when we're talking about, nationwide. But more significantly, and I've said this over and over again, if you think about the biggest crisis in American politics as being minority rule and the failure of democracy and various steps that the right has taken to, restrict voting, to entrench its power, even when it loses electoral majorities, whether that be in state legislatures or in presidential elections, certainly you have the radical disparity between the electorate and the makeup of the Senate, where you have these small rural states are hugely disproportionate. And so minority rule is a requirement of abortion bans because, as we see over and over again, when you put this stuff to straight referenda, people are very clear about the sort of laws that they want. But you also saw in Ohio, at every step, the gerrymandered legislature tried to thwart the will of the people and continues to try to thwart the will of the people, even after a referendum whose result was crystal clear.
I need to push back on one thing Michelle said really quickly, just because, this is not how the South works. There is no difference when it comes to how people feel about abortion in the North and in the South. We have done our own polling down here. We have seen in our states that 60% of the people in Alabama believe that abortion should be completely legal in the first trimester. We are just not allowed to vote. When we had the Mississippi personhood referendum back in 2011, 60% of people voted down personhood. Every state has the same positive feelings towards letting people make their own choices about their bodies, whether it's North or South. So I just need to make sure it's understood. It's because we can't vote.